All right, this session we're going to talk about SpeedTube and some maintenance items around it. So the first thing I want to show is this is a 56-hole soybean plate, and this is what everybody should be running with SpeedTube that's planting soybeans. So in the past, we've ran an 80-cell disc, but we've transitioned last year. I think everybody's running the 56-hole disc. And the real reason behind that is because it's just a single row of holes there. You can kind of see the single row of holes there versus the double row that we were using on the 80-cell. And you get much better singulation performance out of the single row of holes, because in years past, we were using a deflector to knock one row of holes off into the feeder wheels, and it causes spacing issue in soybeans. So everybody should be running this disc if they're running SpeedTube, unless you're planting a really high population, 150,000 plus or something, that would maybe warrant the other plate. But 56-hole disc for soybeans. I do want to show the feeder wheels we recommend replacing every year, whether they look like they need it or not. They are the heart and soul of SpeedTube. So we recommend replacing them every year. They're $10 a row to do. And here is a small feeder wheel that we removed actually last week from a SpeedTube system. So I think probably what happened is a kernel of corn got stuck underneath, wedged between the feeder wheel and the housing, and it just burnt a hole or burnt a groove in there. That's probably the worst one I've ever seen. Here's a large feeder wheel, again, has a groove right in the center there that a seed burnt through. So I recommend replacing those every year, whether they look like they need it or not. Vacuum requirements, so you're going to be running above 25 to 30. 30 is not going to hurt anything. And the idea is you want to hold on to that seed really, really tight on the disc. And it just, as that disc is spinning, it just gives a more crisp handoff into the feeder wheels if you're holding on to it really tight versus sort of tight. So higher vacuum is better. And actually, I've seen slightly better performance when you drive faster with SpeedTube than if you drive just regular. You will get better, or you should get better performance at 7 or 8 miles an hour than you will at 4 with SpeedTube, because that disc is spinning faster and the seeds are entering the feeder wheels with more momentum, and that crisp handoff is achieved and your spacing improves as a result. We're going to flip the camera around and show, if you want to grab that camera. So SpeedTubes run all the time, unless these 3 switches and the master plant, the swath switch doesn't really matter, I don't think, but these 4 switches have to be off, then the SpeedTubes will shut off. If any one of these switches is on, they're running at, they're running, I think, at ground speed. So if you're going down the road and any of these switches are up, they're going to be running. Not ultimately an issue, other than maybe causing some premature wear. So I just recommend, if you think of it, whenever you're transporting or stopped for some reason, is to just shut those switches off, and then your SpeedTubes will shut off. We're going to transition now and look at some maintenance tips from online document.
All right, Clint here. One thing I want to draw your attention to is the resources that our dealers have access to when it comes to operation, installation, diagnostic, we have made those available to you also. So if let me get this out of the way quick. If you go just to precisionplanting.com, and you will see in the top right-hand corner a little support tag. So you can click on support here. And this will list all of our products that we have, along with, you'll see the 2020 downloads for software. And there's actually some also some basic videos in there on how to change fields and name hybrids and things of that nature. But this resource page is might be helpful for you as you're cruising down the on autopilot and planting, and you want to just tinker around a little bit, which doesn't sound terribly enjoyable, but you could go to the support page here, and you can click on any one of these things and view it. So I can go into SpeedTube here, and I'm going to go into service resources, and we've actually have a SpeedTube maintenance manual. This is helpful in a couple of things. It helps me identify the wear parts primarily that are on the SpeedTube, but we call them out. Rumble strip and the SpeedTube module, gearbox motor, drive pulley, housing, idler pulley. All of these parts are listed, and we have an estimated life, wear life on each of those components that's listed here also. As you scroll further down, we're going to actually try to give you some pictures of things that are new versus things that have maybe some age to them. Aaron just showed you these feeder wheels and the wear that we're looking for on the tips of those wheels. He referenced the 56 cell disc, but for those of you, it sounds like you have all transitioned over, so that this deflector is not needed any longer if you're running the 56 hole disc. This pulley here.
Scroll back up, Clint, to the speeder wheels. That one in the middle there, it has an excessive seed treatment on it. So I'll draw your attention to that too, that green seed treatment. That can also be a reason to replace feeder wheels. I said replace them every year anyway, but excessive seed treatment can cause a little bit slicker of a surface, especially some of the seed treatments that have slick polymers with it can cause a slick surface on the feeder wheel, and getting that back to the original rubber is what you want to do for better performance.
So we have highlighted earlier in the 2020 session that singulation is meter performance, and that is true. However, when I'm running SpeedTube, part of my singulation performance could actually be related to the SpeedTubes and specifically these feeder wheels. So just a wear item to pay attention to and take note of. I mean, like I said, up here in the wear section, 100 acres a row or about 1 year. So we're saying about every year you should replace them. These drive pulleys, I've seen not as much maybe in this type of wear, but you'll see kind of a narrow triangular, kind of a point form, and then it angles down a little bit. That is indicated of where you want to kind of see this blunt, flat edge on those wheels. So if anything different than that, I would recommend replacing them. Gearbox, as stated here, you shouldn't hopefully have to replace them. Hopefully not for a while anyway. We would start to see that in the diagnose page on the SpeedTube. The belts, the flighting, you could have missing flights as seen here. You might have some split belts either on the front or in the back that indicate belt wear. A good maintenance tip is to pull the belts out after you're done planting, hang them up, and just take the tension off of them before next season, and then of course inspect them. Eider pulley, we're looking at the belt from the bottom of the speed tube and kind of seeing if it's centered. You can see this one is dragging, it's kind of leaning and gravitating towards one side. That's indicative of causing some friction, and we're going to want that belt somewhat centered, so that can be as a result of the Eider pulley. You will see that on your speed tube health checks primarily. Sometimes in your amp draw on your speed tube will start to be impact and go a little bit higher, and that can be indicative of that.
I would also just say, give those either wheels at the bottom a spin with your finger, and just to make sure they're running true, that bearing's not knocked out, or if they're squeaking, if they're squeaking a lot, that's maybe a cause for concern. So just give those a spin before you put your belts back in.
Yeah, these are self-tensioning belts, so you undo the screw. If I can find a picture of it. It's probably down at the bottom. Forgive me for scrolling fast. But this little screw right here, you undo it. You can spin your belt a few times by your hand and then just tighten it back down. No need to put additional tension on that. It'll take care of itself. Let's see, go back down to the housing cover. Oh, there's the screw. Should have just scrolled down further.
It's got a spring, a spring there. So you just back that screw off, let the spring push, and then tighten the screw back up, and that's it. So really, really simple.
So on to the housing, we're seeing more and more guys are asking us about the wear that they see on the outside of the speed tube, specifically on deer planters. We see this housing against the speed tube guard wearing back and forth, and engineering has dove into it the past few years, and it'll wear to a certain point and then it stops. It will not go any further. So you're not jeopardizing performance of the speed tube by having this wear. It's more of a cosmetic thing. And this is just showing you how that guard is wearing on the side, and then when it gets back to a certain point, it's going to, so the metal there will stop. Inside on the housing, the newer housings as of 2 years ago have this metal strip in here. We're trying to at least diminish the wear on this plastic housing where my seed is going to come down, and we've seen spacing errors. If you have running ketons, sometimes you'll see seed treatment higher up on your ketons. That would be indicative of seed hitting up there, and that's sometimes, indicative really of this ramp that's created. As a seed comes down here, it's going to hit this little worn spot, and it's going to throw that seed out at a different trajectory than it should. So we put this metal strip in there to help at least alleviate and diminish that. But with that caveat, we're also going to start to see some wear on the strip here. You can barely see it, but you can go to the document. There's a little lip forming here that also can cause that seed to get a little bit different trajectory. So this doesn't necessarily eliminate wear, but it's going to prevent that from happening sooner than later. So we're trying to get more longevity out of that housing. And then your rumble strip, I would say if we're looking like that, we probably just need to replace it. But there's a chance a lot of guys haven't been doing that on these.
And
so
those things can fall out and you don't even know it. Well, until you start planting, but you'll know it. But if you open your speed tubes and you're looking at something else and you kind of handling them and spinning them upside down, whatever, those things can fall out and you never know it. And so just be aware of that when you're opening your speed tubes, to try to make sure that rumble strips didn't fall out before you put them back together and back in the plant.
Right. Then we have the feeder wheel comb that your large feeder wheel kind of goes through, and this new design kind of helps reorient the seed as it comes off the meter and goes into the flighting. You can start to see a little grooving action here on this. I haven't seen many worn combs yet, but they will happen. So it's just something to as you're opening up your speed tubes, taking a look at the guts of them, take a note of that part. So, and then of course your guard too. Looking at the thickness, the guard should be replaced if the measured distance is 0.64 inches or less from edge to edge. So a number of different components. There's a lot of moving parts, moving at high speeds in this. So we should expect there to be wear over time. And so there's some things that should be taken care of annually, like our feeder wheels. There's things that might need to be looked at after a few seasons, like our housings, our belts, and like the rumble strips. So just pay attention to that. If you have any questions, just give Aaron a call.
I will also say the best practice is you should remove your belts in the off season. So make sure that you remove your belts in the off season and reinstall them before planting is best practice.
All right, that concludes our session on SpeedTube.